The hospital lights flickered as Nancy made her choice. 2 newborns cried. Only one would go home. Her hands trembled, but desperation drowned her conscience. 20 years later, a knock shattered her perfect life. Before we begin this story, subscribe, like, and drop a comment under this story. Now let's begin the story now. Nancy Okeke was known in her Lagos neighborhood as a polished woman with flawless wigs and expensive handbags. She walked with quiet pride beside her husband Emmanuel, a soft-spoken bank officer who believed family was the greatest blessing from God. They lived in Surulere, where yellow buses roared daily and street hawkers shouted prices under the scorching sun. Their duplex painted cream stood proudly among modest houses, a silent symbol of Emmanuel's steady promotions and Nancy's careful savings. 20 years earlier, their life had not looked this perfect. Emmanuel was only a junior clerk then, and Nancy sold fabric in Balogun Market, counting every naira carefully while praying for the safe delivery of her first child. Nancy had always been ambitious and sensitive to shame. She hated pity and feared gossip deeply. Whenever neighbors whispered about sick children, she would stiffen, promising herself that her own child would never become a subject of sympathy. Emmanuel, on the other hand, carried gentle faith in his heart. He believed God tested families to strengthen them. He spoke kindly to everyone, including beggars, and often reminded Nancy that integrity mattered more than status. Their son Michael grew into a tall, confident young man studying engineering at the University of Lagos. He laughed loudly like Emmanuel, but carried Nancy's sharp eyes. He was admired in church and respected among friends. Yet beneath Nancy's polished smile lived a quiet restlessness. Sometimes at night she would stare at Michael sleeping and whisper, "Forgive me," though no one understood what crime haunted her dreams. Every year on Michael's birthday, Nancy visited a certain hospital alone. She would sit in her car, gripping the steering wheel tightly, memories of that rainy night returning like distant thunder that refused to fade. One humid afternoon, Nancy received a phone call while arranging flowers in her sitting room. The unfamiliar female voice on the line sounded steady but cold. She said, "Madam, we need to talk about something that happened 20 years ago at St. Mary Hospital." Nancy's fingers froze around the vase as her heart began to pound violently. She forced a nervous laugh and replied, "You must have the wrong person." But the caller calmly mentioned the exact date of Michael's birth. The woman introduced herself as Grace, a nurse who had worked the night shift during that stormy delivery. She explained she had carried a burden of silence for years and could no longer live with the truth pressing on her chest. Emmanuel walked into the room smiling with grocery bags in his hands. He stopped when he saw Nancy trembling and asked, "What happened?" But she quickly ended the call and muttered, "It was just a wrong number." That night, Nancy could not eat. Memories flooded her mind of 2 incubators standing side by side and a doctor whispering about complications. She remembered how her own baby struggled to breathe while another newborn cried strongly. She recalled her fear of disgrace and the crushing thought of raising a chronically ill child with their limited income. In that moment, desperation had screamed louder than conscience, and she made a decision that changed destinies. The following morning, another message arrived from Grace saying, "I know what you did, Nancy, and the other mother deserves the truth." She requested a meeting at a quiet cafe near Yaba within 3 days. Nancy stared at the message with dry lips. She realized the past she buried carefully was digging its way back to the surface, and if exposed, it could destroy her marriage, her son, and the reputation she built for 20 years. Nancy arrived at the small cafe in Yaba, wearing dark glasses and a scarf, her palms sweating despite the air conditioner humming softly. She scanned the room nervously until her eyes met a middle-aged woman staring at her with heavy knowledge. Grace looked older than Nancy remembered. Her once bright eyes now carried years of guilt and sleepless nights. She gestured to the empty chair and said calmly, "Thank you for coming, Nancy, because the truth can no longer breathe in silence." Nancy tried to maintain composure and whispered, "You have no proof of anything, so be careful." But Grace leaned forward and replied, "I have records, and I remember how you begged me that night when the doctor stepped out." Flashbacks rushed into Nancy's mind of her crying uncontrollably beside the incubators. She had offered Grace money and promised silence, saying she could not survive the shame of raising a dying child in poverty. Grace's voice trembled as she continued, The other mother, Mary, lost her healthy baby and was told he had severe complications. She buried that child believing it was God's will, while you carried her son home. Nancy felt the ground slipping beneath her carefully constructed world. She whispered, "I was desperate and afraid," but Grace responded, "Desperation does not erase sin, and every lie grows teeth with time." Meanwhile at home, Emmanuel noticed Nancy's distant behavior and growing anxiety. He asked repeatedly what troubled her, but she avoided his eyes and claimed it was business stress, though her hands shook whenever Michael spoke about his future. Grace ended the meeting with a warning, saying Mary recently moved back to Lagos searching for closure. She intends to review hospital records, and when she does, your perfect life may collapse like a house built on sand. Nancy returned home with her mind in chaos. Every sound in the house felt louder than usual. Michael's laughter pierced her chest like accusation, and Emmanuel's gentle questions sounded like distant thunder preparing to storm her carefully guarded secret. Days passed, yet fear refused to loosen its grip. Nancy began avoiding church gatherings and market friends. She imagined whispers following her footsteps. Each knock on the gate made her heart leap violently against her ribs. One evening, Michael excitedly announced he had been selected for a prestigious internship abroad. Emmanuel embraced him proudly, while Nancy forced a smile. Inside, she wondered if fate was preparing to separate her from the son she stole. Later that night, Nancy confronted Grace through a trembling phone call. She offered more money and begged for silence, but Grace responded firmly, "I do not want your money. I want justice for Mary." As tension tightened, Emmanuel discovered a hospital envelope hidden inside Nancy's wardrobe. Curiosity led him to question her softly, but Nancy snapped defensively, creating a crack in their marriage that had never existed before. Meanwhile, Mary visited St. Mary Hospital, seeking archived files. Her persistent inquiries unsettled former staff members. Rumors began circulating among old nurses, and the buried story slowly crawled back into living memory. Nancy's nightmares returned with brutal intensity. She saw two grown men standing before her, asking which one truly belonged to her womb. She woke up sweating, clutching Michael's childhood photo like a lifeline. The pressure became unbearable when Grace sent a final message, saying Mary has found the truth and she is coming to meet you soon. Nancy realized that the storm she created 20 years ago was now standing at her door. The knock came on a quiet Saturday morning, while Emmanuel read the newspaper. Nancy froze in the kitchen as Michael moved toward the door, innocently, unaware that the past stood outside, breathing heavily. Mary stood at the entrance with tear-swollen eyes and trembling hands. Beside her was a young man about Michael's age, whose face carried a striking resemblance to Emmanuel's youthful photographs. Emmanuel invited them inside politely, not sensing danger. But Nancy felt her knees weaken as Mary's eyes locked onto hers, with silent accusation that burned deeper than any spoken insult. Mary's voice cracked as she said, "I have spent 20 years mourning a child I now know was never mine to bury. The hospital records and testimonies have revealed a cruel exchange on the night our sons were born." Michael looked confused and laughed nervously, saying, "This must be a mistake." But the young man beside Mary stared at Nancy intensely and whispered, "I grew up sick and struggling, while someone else lived the life meant for me." Emmanuel turned slowly toward Nancy, his face pale and shaken. He asked in a broken voice, "Tell me this is not true, Nancy. Please tell me you did not betray another mother and deceive your own husband." Tears streamed down Nancy's face as silence answered for her. Years of guilt collapsed into one unbearable moment, and she realized the fortress of lies she built had finally crushed her family beneath it. As shouting filled the living room and Michael stepped back in disbelief, Nancy felt completely alone for the first time, understanding that karma had not come to wound her gently. Silence swallowed the room after Nancy collapsed into confession, her voice shaking as she admitted switching the babies out of fear and poverty. The truth finally escaping her lips like a prisoner breaking free after decades. Mary closed her eyes as tears rolled down her cheeks. She explained that her son Daniel had suffered chronic illness and hardship growing up, yet he remained kind and hardworking despite the pain he carried unknowingly. Michael stood frozen, struggling to breathe. He looked at Daniel carefully and noticed similarities in their height and eyes. a strange pull inside his chest, whispering that blood speaks, even when silence tries to bury it. Emmanuel's faith wavered yet did not shatter. He whispered, "We cannot undo the past, but we must face it with truth," his steady tone shifting the room from explosive anger toward trembling reflection. Daniel stepped forward and said, "I did not come to steal anyone's life. I only came to know where I truly belong and to understand why my mother buried an empty truth for 20 years." Nancy fell at Mary's feet begging for forgiveness, admitting that fear ruled her heart that night and pride blinded her conscience. She offered to accept any consequence as long as her sons would not destroy each other. Grace, who had accompanied Mary, revealed official documents and confirmed the hospital mix-up publicly. The evidence ended denial and forced everyone to confront reality without illusion or escape. In that heavy moment, Michael surprised them all by saying softly, "Whether by blood or by upbringing, you are still my parents." His words became the first fragile bridge between devastation and the possibility of healing. The confrontation reached its peak when Daniel faced Nancy directly, his voice steady but wounded as he asked, "Did you ever think about the mother whose arms left that hospital empty while you celebrated?" Nancy struggled to meet his gaze, her words tangled with regret as she replied, "I thought only about survival, and my fear blinded me. I see now that my gain was built on another woman's endless grief." Mary stepped forward with trembling strength and said, "You stole my joy and buried me in confusion for years. I questioned God and myself, believing I was cursed while you lived peacefully beside my son." Emmanuel raised his voice for the first time, saying, "We will not solve this through hatred." He demanded they decide what justice meant, without destroying two young men who were innocent victims of adult weakness. Daniel turned toward Michael and said, "I do not hate you, brother, but I cannot ignore that our lives were switched like market goods without our consent. We must choose how to move forward together." Michael's voice cracked as he responded, "I grew up loved and healthy while you suffered. If sharing responsibility can restore balance, then I am ready to stand beside you, not against you." Lawyers were consulted, and hospital authorities investigated publicly. Nancy confessed, formally accepting legal and social consequences. Her reputation shattered across Surulere as neighbors whispered the story openly. In the end, both families agreed that truth would guide the future. The young men would build a bond as brothers, while Nancy faced accountability, the confrontation transforming rage into painful but necessary justice. The legal process moved steadily, and the hospital publicly admitted negligence alongside Nancy's deliberate act. Financial compensation was arranged for Mary and Daniel, though no amount of money could fully restore the years stolen from them. Nancy stood before the court, with lowered head, accepting responsibility without excuse. Her confession softened public anger slightly, yet she understood that forgiveness from society would take longer than any formal sentence. Emmanuel chose not to abandon her, despite heartbreak. He told friends that justice must walk with mercy, his quiet strength surprising many who expected him to walk away from the woman who shattered their peace. Michael began visiting Mary and Daniel regularly. Awkward conversations slowly transformed into genuine connection, shared laughter emerging cautiously as they discovered similar talents and mannerisms that reflected shared blood. Daniel's health improved after receiving proper medical care funded partly by Nancy's restitution. He enrolled in a vocational program and proved resilient, determined not to let bitterness define the rest of his life. Mary found unexpected comfort watching both young men sit at the same table. She realized that though destiny had twisted painfully, it had also returned her son to her in a way she once believed impossible. Nancy devoted herself to community service at maternal health centers, speaking openly about fear and consequences, her testimony becoming a warning to desperate mothers who might consider dishonest paths during moments of weakness. Slowly, the storm settled into quiet understanding. The families learned that while the past could never be rewritten, the future could still be shaped with honesty, humility, and deliberate acts of reconciliation. Years later, Surulere spoke of the incident not with scandal, but with solemn respect. The once whispered story became a lesson shared among families about choices made in fear and the long shadows they cast. Michael completed his engineering degree and built a promising career, yet he never forgot the fragile truth that shaped his adulthood. He carried both gratitude and responsibility in equal measure within his heart. Daniel
This
grew
prototype
stronger in
uses
health
locally
and
sourced
confidence,
sensors to
discovering
reduce
talents
latency
in
by
technology
40%.
and
This makes it
design.
ideal for
He often
scaling across
joked that destiny
communities.
delayed him but did not defeat him, his resilience becoming proof that hardship can refine rather than ruin. Mary and Emmanuel formed an unlikely friendship rooted in shared love for their sons. They attended, graduated together, and supported each other through lingering emotional scars that only time and patience could soothe. Nancy's beauty faded gently with age, but wisdom replaced vanity. She spoke carefully to young mothers in clinics, reminding them that desperation whispers lies, while integrity demands courage during the hardest nights. Sometimes she would sit quietly and watch Michael and Daniel laugh together, her eyes moist yet peaceful, understanding that although her sin caused pain, truth had rebuilt something stronger than the lie she once protected. The families chose not to exchange the young men permanently. Instead, they embraced expanded love, recognizing that motherhood is more than blood, and fatherhood is more than biology. It is daily sacrifice and unwavering presence. And so this tale reminds us that fear can tempt the heart into darkness, but truth will always return, demanding balance. For karma walks slowly yet surely, and only honesty can lead a troubled soul back into light. And with that, the story comes to an end. Now tell me, if you were to find out today that you were actually swapped during childbirth, and your current parents are not your real parents, would you still be with them as their child? Go on, tell me in the comments, and also subscribe and like this story. Bye for now, and we'll be back with more stories every week.